you very much. Well, we are going to call to order this budget work session for City of Starkville. This is September the 5th, and it's 4 o'clock p.m. We have board members present. We have our department heads present. Public and media are here. So we will, as we announced at the board meeting, our regular board meeting on September the 3rd, we are working through our budget so that we can get to a point where we can adopt the budget at our next board meeting, which will be September the 17th. And as Alderman Vaughn was kind enough to remind me that we would like to take a moment of silence. Alderman Vaughn, if you'd like to say anything about that, moment of silence for those hurricane victims and potentially all the victims associated with the weather that has been plaguing the Bahamas and plaguing our East Coast now. I think that is highly appropriate. So, moment of silence. Thank you. All right, Alderman Sistrunk, I'm going to let you lead off with this because you, I think, have done a little bit more in the number crunching, and you have provided that to each of us. I think everybody has a copy here. So if you would, please, I'll let you lead off.
And I just want to give some overview information. First of all, I'd like to say that the information that I have is things that I've put together because I am interested in the numbers. I think our responsibility as board members to make sure that we manage our money and be aware of what we're doing with our money is one of our highest duties to our constituents and to the residents and businesses of Starkville. Lisa Harden, our city clerk, and her staff are the ones who control the budget in terms of data entry and that sort of thing. My role is more a review role, just like any of y'all. If you had comments or questions, certainly Ms. Harden would take those under advisement. So having said that, the first thing I wanted to do was take a look back and see how we were doing this year compared to our budget from this year, fiscal year 19. And at September 4th, when we ran the reports, we have an excess of revenues over expenses of just under $850,000. We will probably during these last few days of the fiscal year take in another sales tax distribution from the state, a property tax distribution from the county that will include the tax sales on the courthouse steps from August 23rd, and then just miscellaneous other revenues that are due to us, last payments on the fire contract, this, that, and the other. So that's probably about $1.2 million that will be coming in. So we probably have about $2,050,000 to finish the year out in, and it will go away like that because we have another payroll which will run about $450,000. We have a September 17th claims docket that will run about $1.1 million because it includes several bond payments. And then we'll have a year-end claims docket that's used to finish up the fiscal year, and those typically run about $500,000.
Yeah, this is that sheet.
This is that front sheet that everybody has. So you take that $2,067,000 in expenses that we have rolling our way versus what we have on hand and what we expect to collect, and we're pretty much end the year at a break-even point, which is what we're always shooting for. So having said that, the budget is not something we do once and never look at again. So I'm gonna address a few things that have come up as questions during the public hearings, during the board discussion, that sort of thing, and then I'm going to give it to you guys to talk about. This is a schedule of assessments that we get every July from the county, and it tells us what our assessed values are for the city of Starkville. That's their number as of June 30th. There will be people who will come and say my property is not assessed correctly, and those will be people who say my property is assessed too highly, not too low. And so the number probably ends up being something less than that, but that's our jumping off point for figuring out what we're going to collect from property taxes. This next schedule, which is just a little Excel sheet, looks like this. is how we calculate what we're likely to collect. So we start with that assessed value, we multiply it times our millage rate, and that's the ad valorem taxes that we would collect if we collected every penny that is due us. But like the real world and like a business and anybody else, a church that has pledges, we're not going to collect every penny of it. Our collection percentage has been slipping. It used to be as high as 98%. We budgeted this year at 96.75%. Ms. Harden, you had calculated today, based on what you know about where we're going to be, that we're at 96.85.
After the tax sale numbers from Mr. Morgan.
And that's after the tax sale. So we're using a very reasonable number. Most places use something that's more like 95%. But we are calculating that at the at what we think is a likely collection amount. And that's where we got the $7.2 million of property taxes and ad valorem and auto type property taxes that we've included in the budget. So when somebody says, well, a mill is worth X and we're not budgeting at that rate, it is because we do not collect 100% of that mill. Even with the property sales tax, we do not ultimately collect 100% of that. And I don't.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do we have any idea why it's slipping some from whatever 98 down to?
Collection rate, I do
Yeah.
not. I've not talked to Mr. Morgan about why. I don't know if people are going back and getting their properties reassessed after they get their card.
Yeah.
You know, after the June 30th amount, maybe they're getting some reassessed. Maybe that they're tearing down a house or, I just don't know.
Okay,
There's
that's just
laws.
curious. Okay.
It's probably like most other things when you're trying to make collections, it just, it happens. So that was a question that's come up. This chart is one that's generated another few questions, because this was, when we had our first budget workshop back in July, this was my attempt to sort of explain where the big number movers were in our budgeting. And this was for me as much as for anybody else. And again, y'all are smart people, and y'all are smart people, and you can do these sorts of reviews for yourself. And certainly we can always use more eyes looking at this sort of thing. But this sheet has generated a couple of questions. If I were to do it again today, I'd get different numbers because we have different information now than we did at the end of July. For instance, the sales tax projection, we have increased our sales tax by projections by $150,000. I would probably drop that number to 120 if I were doing it today, because we've had some flat years, a flat year just a couple of years ago. As Alderman Walker mentioned, so much of how we do is dependent on how Mississippi State is doing with athletics and that sort of thing. Looking at the averages over the last 2 or 3 years, I'd probably use a lower number there. But again, if I did this again today, I would come up with different numbers. Another number that's on there that has generated some questions is the idea of this, the personnel changes that have added about $195,000 to our budget. What I have is a group summary that tells me these are all the general fund salaries by category, and I had a previous group summary. Current budget minus the previous one is where that $195,000 came from. Forgive the typo, but on this next sheet, at the top of that sheet, that kind of accounts for where those personnel changes have occurred. Longevity raises are something that we give our employees on what anniversary dates, Mr. Ashford?
3, 6, 9, 10, 15, 20, 25.
3, 6, 10, 15,
20, 25.
20, 25. And it's a 3% raise based on your hire date. Mr. Ashford went through, kind of calculated about how much that's going to impact next year's budget, and it's just a little under $30,000. We hired mid-year a construction inspector who's worth his weight in gold.
Yep.
But we only have him in this year's budget at a half a year. Next year, we're gonna have to have him in the budget at a full year. That's another $26,000 or so. The community development department head was a position that was vacant for a good bit of this past fiscal year and had been reduced to a certain amount. Now it has been filled, and we're having to budget for a full year of that salary. So there's a $38,000 increase. We've had promotions in the fire department and the police department, and when you drill down and look within those two departments, that's about $25,000. Chief Nichols, who's leaving us, we budgeted for him to leave us by knowing that he's gonna have a leave payout, and so that's a salary item that we don't typically have in his position. And then I probably didn't budget enough for his replacement because I was thinking that we might possibly get somebody at his rate or a little lower. And from what I'm hearing, at his rate will be good if we can stay in that ballpark. So that may be a little low. One of the big things that's causing that payroll number, and you'll see it playing out on the other side in the contractuals line, is we had some people who were at the parks who were considered contractual laborers, and we have during last year brought them on board as employees, and that accounts for about $60,000 of that increase.
They did not meet the IRS definition of
Yep.
1099 employees.
Yep.
So
So
save the city some problems.
So we made that conversion.
And we don't want the IRS
We do
coming
not want
after us.
problems with the IRS.
Our assistant engineer received his professional engineering certification, and so he has a 10% increase that came with that. One of Ms. Harden's personnel, her assistant clerks, LaShonda, completed her certification process. There's an increase that comes with that, and then there's just a few dollars of stuff that happens out there. But that's how you get to that $195,000, and it happens year over year. It may not always be that number because we may not always have that park situation, but
Well, and I will also, if you don't mind me adding, on the contract employees that were added to payroll under expenses, you'll also see in brackets where it came out of the expense side too.
yeah.
So it's not a true 195 in payroll.
Yeah, and that there were actually some other contractual service lines that went down aside from the parks. So you'll see the payroll part of it, but you'll also see in that chart that the contractual services has a negative there. So that's where that number came from. Another number that was discussed a little bit at the board table was overtime and our budget for overtime. So the chart below that personnel line shows you what we've paid in overtime in these general fund accounts in fiscal 17, 18, and where we are year to date in fiscal 19. What we budgeted in fiscal 19, what we budgeted in fiscal 20. And I picked again, y'all can do this as well as I can do this, but to try to provide y'all some information, I picked the big accounts. I didn't go through every department, but the big accounts for overtime usage are going to be the police and the fire department. The police will include things like dispatchers and DUI. The streets department tends to rack up a little overtime. Parks has been increasing their overtime a little bit, and then there's just some other overtime scattered throughout the city. But when we adjust for reasonable amounts in our big users of overtime, we increase the budget up to $295. We don't have to put that in there, but we're just going to have to deal with it during the year if our overtime trends hold.
Well, I want to ask that question about actuals versus, I mean, it looks like, let's say fire department, we're going FY 17, 130, 186. So year to date, it went $40,000, $50,000 already what's going on there? I mean, is that, I know you
I
said
think
they've been
that's-
budgeted again for 50,000.
I think that's a function as much as the way we staff, and that because of the schedules they work, there is a certain amount of overtime that's built in, and we're just seeing that play out.
I wouldn't wanna obviously budget 50,000 if you're running, you know,
We, last year.
200 on
well,
average. So, I
last
mean,
last
is
year.
that something to do with Fire Station 5? Is that?
It is not. What we
Chief,
thought we were gonna.
Chief.
Chief, would you like to speak to that?
I mean,
Yeah, 2016, I think now, 2017, we changed the way we got paid. Before this, we got paid, everybody got paid the same, not the same amount of hours. So it changed about 2 years ago, when we made the change to do it right. Now, every time we get paid, all of our guys get overtime, every pay period, no matter what.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's not something we can control.
Y'all bumped off the 20-80 hours and went to some other format which
Changed
is
to
sufficient for shift work or
26,
something.
56,
Now-
something like that.
So originally, they was getting paid set hours as if they were salary employees. Calculating their pay at $29.96 per Fair Labor Standard Act. You can't do that with firefighters. There's a specific code that you have to pay them. And so now it's being paid at $27.56. And so they have A, B, and C shift. So depending on the shifts that they work and the hours, if they work over 106 between whatever shift that they work, either the A shift or B shift, they're gonna always get 14 hours of overtime because that's the way you have to pay the firefighters if they work over 106 hours
Is
for their
it
shift.
typical like a 40-hour work week, is time and a half past 40 hours? Because it's a emergency services, you can't hold a true rate, or you have to pay them an overtime? You have to pay them overtime
You have to
rate?
pay them overtime.
Anything over what, 40 hours or?
No, firefighters are set up on
29.
27.56. So they're not set as standard 28 employees.
There's special rules for them. And in talking with, last year when we were developing the budget and talking with department heads, there was some thought that possibly we could manage this overtime in some other way. And it just, it clearly, it's not, either because of vacancies and people having to backfill and being paid overtime rate because of that, or staffing, other staffing issues. Clearly, we're not gonna be able to manage those positions from that perspective. I know that Chief Yarborough continues to look at other staffing models to see if there's something that we could do, but to this date, we've just not come up with an answer, and if we know that we're gonna be paying the overtime, you're right, we need to budget for it. So-
And if we're gonna add those 2 additional firefighters, they will be factored into that same addition that we don't have any choice about, so.
So those were questions that have come up that I took a look for myself and wanted to share what I had done. Somebody else may look at it and come up with a different answer, but that's where I am. You have a chart with outside contributions on it, and then you have a detailed line-by-line budget. I've highlighted some things that I always look at, and I tend to try to look at the big numbers, and I try to look at the big numbers and make sure that they make sense, and then if something's consistent from one year to the another, not worry as much about it. But at this point, I think if there are questions, if there is guidance for budget development, that if y'all have individual questions, and I've offered this individually in the past, and I offer it again today and in the future, and I know Ms. Harden too. If you have questions about something, we'll absolutely look at it.
Officer Sisram, how much is the budget shortfall we try to close by? What?
If we do nothing new, if we don't do a pay increase, if we don't hire 2 new firemen, if we don't buy the equipment and the cameras and things that the police department and IT and the streets department need, we have a balanced budget with no tax increase. But if we want to do anything new, I don't know, and what we would need y'all to figure out is where you want to cut expenses in order to fund those things.
So you're saying that we can cover the PERS the health insurance and the new TIF and the pay increases that we're, no, that's
Not that
a
pay.
discretionary. But those three I just mentioned, that PERS, the health insurance, and this
Yes.
new TIF coming online, we
Yes.
can cover that with the
Yes,
current revenue.
we just cannot do anything new. We cannot give our employees a new compensation package that gets our police up to market standards, that gets our laborers up to a $12 minimum hour, $12 per hour minimum wage. That the linemen, well, they're enterprise funds, so they're separate. But we cannot do those things, in my opinion, with the revenues that we have now. And that's why I have proposed a 1.5 mil tax increase. Or about a 1% is another way to look at it. Whatever your tax bill, it's gonna be about 1% of that.
What's our new fire contract? It was 275 last year or 250 last year?
It was 280,
And
290,
it goes
somewhere in
to,
there.
what's it go to, 325 this coming year?
It will, let's see.
In the first year of this new
350, I
contract?
think.
Give me a minute, and I'll
Is it
find
that the first year?
It's on page 3, MSU Fire Control.
Yeah, last year it was 281.5, and this year it will be 375. It would have gone up a little bit anyway, but with the new
From what to
contract.
what? From 280?
281 to 375.
85.
85,000 or so.
Yeah. Which is where that is, the number.
Yeah.
Then is that
10.
money spoken for debt service on the fire truck? Or is that money that will go into our
It
fire
is.
departments? It goes
It
to the
is.
general fund.
It's
Can it-
what pocket you want to put it in or take it out of. It is in the general fund, and it's either helping us pay for our current firemen or for the fire truck or whatever. But it is not a sufficient amount to allow us to hire new firemen.
Probably not enough for us to service debt on the new fire trucks. We're
Well,
taking
the
that around.
new fire truck's gonna be about 85,000, and so, yeah, it does kind of wash there. If that's where you want to say those dollars are being spent.
Is that new truck a Mississippi State only truck or is that a general truck?
No, every truck is a general truck.
It's truck for the entire city.
Yeah. All of our trucks, even though state may have paid for the older ones, they still serve the entire city. So that was never a dedicated only truck, so.
Are some non-discretionary or mandatory, 195,000 PERS, health insurance 130, and I'm gonna call this TIF thing coming online from Caddy Sports, and what is it, Starkville Crossing, 175. I mean, that's a new budget item, we're gonna pay for that 15 years. What is that, 195? And
It will probably,
Academy TIF 175.
Yeah, everything in that column is, you're
Yeah.
saying we can cover.
everything in this first column, we can cover. We
170.
cannot cover anything in the second column, in my opinion. And I have one opinion, and like I said, I like numbers, and I've had, my work experience has been looking at what people have given us and going, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. I have a good bit of review experience there, but it's not rocket science. You know, y'all can look and go, well, yep, that ad valorem tax calculation is right. Our airplane state revenue has hovered in that $4,000 range forever, and we're budgeting 4,100. Yeah, and that's how you review things.
So is another way to say it, if I'm looking at page 1 where we're showing the general fund, we got the page right here that shows how we got the ad valorem, 6.3 million. We're showing the tax, the auto-related, 690. And what you're proposing as the 1.5 mil increase is the 397.5. So perhaps another way to think of it is, if our budget is balanced now, which is what Alderman Sistrunk has presented to us, if you take out that 397.5, you gotta find, is that not, help me?
It actually on page 48,
Is the other half of that
Is the other
entry
half
where
of the
we,
entry.
where we,
so
What
it wasn't,
page?
page 48. It's the next to
But
last
it's
so
page.
the
rather
next slide,
than,
babe.
rather than distributing through departments and having to go back and rip it out afterwards, we were gonna wait until after the vote to amend it and distribute it by department. But
It's-
All right, so say it's,
So that's an even entry right there. It's in same number in revenue for the 1.5 as in expenses.
look at mine.
So the PERS, the health insurance, and the TIFs, I add up as a 500,000, but you've got that covered in the budget, that, we can handle that.
That's our organic growth. That's from the additional assessed value revenue coming in.
Okay.
But yeah, that doesn't, and if you were to go back to Alderman Sistrun's number that she said, well, maybe I'd ratchet down the sales tax from 150 to 120, and then that puts you, you know, where are you gonna come up with
Well,
that?
and
But
if
that's
you do your pay increases where you got,
Yeah.
what we discussed, NAB discussed with us the other day, and the really good report you did for us, plus the other, we paid prorated amounts out last year for several department people that are we gonna get full, have to pay full salaries on this year. So that's 195,000, right? Okay.
Okay.
And so just on the sheet, the summary of the budget, if we're looking at the pay increase for our workers, you got that budget at 105, and that's, you're saying 50%, so that's halfway through the fiscal year. So if
Is that
people want
April?
thereabouts, so if we wanted to do that starting next month, we're doubling that number.
That number's a little high because it was an old guess, but yeah, essentially. None of those numbers are off hundreds of thousands of dollars. They may be off a few thousand here or there. But, and again, part of that is timing because the city, much like your own personal finances, are not static. Our finances are not static. And so you look at it on one date, you get a number. You look at it on another date, you get a different number.
Just the whole rough idea with the sales tax.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask this, on the tax increment financing, is Middle Market Online, are we serving debt on that 50,000 a year?
That one's gonna pay off pretty soon, in what, 3 more years, something like that, 3 or 4 more years.
Cotton Mill, is it online? Are we paying?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But County Sports, Rock Cross is coming online. And if Cotton Mill meets targets, they'll come online, right?
They are working their way through their brownfield portion of their payback, and they have to work through that before they come to us for a tip.
And that one's pretty interesting in that they don't generate that much sales tax.
Right.
They're more heavily invested in property taxes.
The mill and the car dealership is not coming online yet either.
The mill marketplace where Chick-fil-A and Salsaritas and those things are, we're doing debt service with it.
How much is it?
125,000, something like that.
I just do a little, just ballpark, real big. So in that assuming if we take off that Milton Market thing, well, these other tiers, they all kick in, we're gonna be pushing $1 million a year in debt service on tip bonds, and that's coming out of our general fund.
Well, the kicker to that is they're supposed to be putting that much into our general fund.
Well, I mean,
so,
they put it in there, we pay it back out as a wash, it's net.
Right, exactly.
And so I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not a tax and spend person, but if we need to make up $350,000 or $400,000 to hire 2 more firemen to get our stations, our 5 station staff, that will make us a better fire department, protect our property, our citizens, in the city of Starkville, and reward us a year from now with a Class 3 fire protection rating. We ought to do that. And we have created these expenses by doing tax increment financing, TIF bonds for these developments. And some of them would have made it. I know probably 1 or 2 that probably would have come online anyway without a TIF. We just did it. We just did it. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's tough to go in and put $1.5 million tax on, but at the same time, on the other side of it, we've done some things that have had maybe, in at least in the case of 1 or 2 of them not been done, we would be getting additional revenue from maybe a couple of these projects that would have been built anyway, because we saw that in the case of Walmart and Neighborhood Market, and I suspect County Sports would be built without TIF. There's no way to know, but I suspect it would have. And but I'm just saying that I think it's appropriate, and the figures I looked at and shared with the board the other night at the meeting, that you take that 20-town survey, that averages. And those are good towns, all of them good business towns. I didn't take poor business. I took good business towns, looked at them, and they're averaging a little over 40, 42, 43 mills. And if you take these what we call really good business towns, the South Havens and the Oxfords and Hattiesburg and Madison, places like that, when the income levels are high and they generate a lot of sales per capita and everything, those are still 37, 38 mil average dams. So we are on the lower end, and when we add $1.5 million of ad valorem tax, we still gonna be substantially on the lower end of the. In fact, in that 20 towns I looked at, only 2 had ad valorem tax rates under 30 mils. And so.
And that's not a reason for us to raise our taxes, but it is an indication that we have not been willing to pay for things that other communities have seen as appropriate and necessary.
Not in and of itself, it's not, but
Yeah.
you don't raise taxes just because you low tax. Oh no, your tax rate's low if you can afford to do things. But if something important like improving our fire protection class rating, our staffing of stations, we can't do that. I think that's something important we ought to do.
I do not disagree.
Well,
I would like to see us do all these things. And you have a really short window. That's what we're here for today, is to beat through this detailed budget. If you have questions about something, if you have some idea of where we can cut expenses, but just to be absolutely honest, 75% of our expenses are fixed, and we have no, short of people, yep, we have no way to reduce those numbers. Columbus this year has struggled with their budget and saved about $600,000 over the course of the year by hiring freezes. And what was the other thing that they did?
cutting travel.
They made some cuts like that. A hiring freeze would absolutely work, but it would kill the police department to have a hiring freeze. It would kill the fire department to have a hiring freeze. We'll just wind up turning around, sanitation. We'll turn around, and every penny we save in a hiring freeze, we'll spend on overtime.
Now, have we ever done, is there a way to do, I'll ask it this way, is there a way to do or to quantify what it costs us to lose people and then retrain them? What is our training costs, for example?
We haven't ran those numbers yet, but off the top of the head, I can tell you when we send people to training for police officers, it costs $6,000. Uniform expenses that's included in it is roughly another $5,000. That's not including the weapons fees and all the special equipment that they have. I think that's probably another $3,000. So rough numbers, you're looking at one position in the police department being anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000.
And that's just in hard numbers without the training associated with it and the time of putting them together and lost time from having only one less officer and overtime that goes with staffing for that. So those kinds of numbers, those are the soft ones you really have a hard time with, but the hard ones are the actual uniforms, et cetera, and training costs.
And for testing, every time we have to go for a hiring process, we got to pay for those tests, we got to pay somebody to grade them, all that.
Yeah, okay. So it is not an insubstantial amount of money when we are not paying people adequately for what they do and that we are not competitive. It costs us in loss and time, and basically those are our first responders. So I would say from a safety standpoint. So I think it is critical. I think it's critical that we give our people a raise, and I think that what NAV has provided through the salary survey remains something that's worth our consideration in doing. As I said Tuesday night, these things that we've got circled as discretionary, I just don't think of them that way, because I think that they are what we need to do to keep moving forward in the strong way that we have. And I will say that till the day the vote comes, and I'll say that afterwards. So I'm hopeful that y'all who are concerned about a tax raise, and you know, I can say I'm not going to not be hit by a tax raise or a tax increase. I get hit just like everybody else, so I'm not out here suggesting something that the rest of us are not going to be impacted by. I've got most of my property is commercial property. I'm not going to get a 10%. I'm going to get a 15% on commercial property. So, you know, it bites. But I happen to think that when we do the best we can and we pay our people and we show that we're moving forward in multiple ways, not the least of which are security cameras, another code enforcement person, a fire rating of 3, streets, hot mix asphalt. Edward, you're here, our hot mix truck, piece of equipment. How old is it? 20 years old?
It's not quite that old, it's about 15.
It's 15.
Okay. And it spends, how much of its life in the shop?
We did an evaluation of that, we just ran 2 years back, so the last 2 years, and actually, this calendar year in 2018, we had 17 incidences when it was either in our shop or had to be go to another private shop for repairs.
Right, so it is long overdue, and, all of us want to see our potholes filled. So this impacts every one of us in the wards throughout the community, because we've each got potholes and we each need that particular piece of equipment. The chief's fingerprint piece of equipment, that's I don't know what it means when we can't communicate with NCIC, but it means something big, right, Chief? Would you share just a little bit of that? So.
Yes, ma'am. What it is it's a machine that can talk to other agencies. So if we got a burglary suspect here, and we put the fingerprints into this machine, if Columbus has it on file, or whoever has this machine, APHIS machine on file, then we can get their record here and say, this guy is not in our system for this, that, and the other. We don't have the technology to talk to anybody. Because we probably hadn't updated, I know, since I've been chief, it's almost 6 years, so I'm gonna say about 10 years. So basically, it's just sitting there as a paperweight.
Oh, okay, that's even worse than I
use
thought.
it.
Okay, all right, well, and so there you go. To me, there's nothing discretionary about that, so.
And my guess is, if somebody gifted you a fingerprint machine tomorrow, you have other needs that you could use that money
No
for.
doubt.
Okay.
Well, point being, that is a critical piece of equipment, as are the security cameras. I think in our future of looking forward of how we're going to have enforcement in multiple ways for police and security for all of the areas of town. So, I've made the case once, and I won't talk about it anymore, but I do not view these items that are listed as discretionary in the same kind of way as, whether I'm gonna have ice cream versus whether I'm gonna have, a Diet Coke. So, anyway. I'm sorry? You're giving me a hard time about my choices.
You're metaphors.
Oh, sorry, okay. Ice
Local-
cream versus a protein
Local
meal.
government's where people get people get the most bang for the tax dollar.
Absolutely.
At the local level. And I say that the county, I think pretty much, but I think municipal government's really stretching dollars. And you can see by the way we comb those budget, trying to find, a way to pay our employees and keep, fair wage and keep, in particular, entry-level fire policemen from, let's train them to go to Meridian, end up in Meridian, Tupelo, Jackson, somewhere like that. And, I mean, this is just, to me, stuff that we need to do. And, it's come to the point where it's gonna take $1.5 million of tax to make this thing balance, balance out if we do the discretionary, you said it's not discretionary, but it's the stuff that we, I guess technically you could call discretionary. But, I just think it's important to do.
Okay.
We stretch it dollar or we stretch it.
I've just sort of gone through and looked at the first 17 pages, and which is mostly personnel and departments, and just that the budgeting from last year's budget to this year's budget, personnel is up, and when you look at it, that's mostly either the longevity or PERS related. Social Security's up, retirement contributions are up. And one of the things that you also notice that in many of the cases, the contractual services is actually down, which I think is a positive sign. So I don't think, I guess if we're looking for a place to define where there might be some more money, I don't think it's in the personnel unless we decide we need fewer people. And so I got to get further into it than where I'm at right now, but I don't see where the savings are right at that point.
I think Ben mentioned it was about $500,000-$600,000, and I saw it in the fines and forfeits. But, and we were, one time, 4 or 5 years ago, we were 1.3 million in fines and forfeitures and things, and we're like 600,000 now. I don't know. I mean, I knew people back then that said they thought Star was waiting at the city limits for folks when they rolled, they did, and said that when they rolled in, and said, you know, that, and I don't want us to be a community that where we send a signal, that we wait for folks when they hit the city limits to pop them a ticket or something. And, so I don't know whether that's an area to try. I mean, I don't think we ought to try to raise fines and forfeits, forfeitures and things, to try to increase our budget. I just don't think that's the place we ought to do it.
What?
Go ahead, Ben, sorry.
I'm gonna listen to your comment first.
Oh.
I was just gonna ask Sandra and Mayor, maybe on the annexation proposed, we've got a hearing date coming up next month. If we prevail in that action, what kind of impact will it have as far as revenue? Did
We will
anticipate?
we will see some new revenues, but it is all committed for new police officers, for additional tax collection efforts by the county. It's a revenue neutral.
At best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't
at best.
intended.
At best.
Yeah, it wasn't intended as a revenue generator, yeah, but, and hopefully, you know, as things happen, it'll, you know, things will develop out there in ways that will be beneficial. Yeah.
And because of the way we collect property taxes, we collect them a year in arrears, we won't see any impact for the property taxes until the next budget year. We will see some sales taxes, but.
It being a work session, will there be any, set, or any place for citizen comments? I mean, if anybody's got anything to say here from the public, is this?
We don't normally do
Okay.
citizen comments during a work
No, I
session.
just always like to find that. And then the second thing, the reality of all this, and I want to kind of ask y'all too, because David, you may have already said some comments that you wouldn't, I want to cut to the chase before we sit here all day, and you're not going to support any kind of tax.
Well, I've spoken with some of you about my feelings toward it. I really didn't have an appetite for increasing taxes. I also see the need to get Fire Station 5 housed. We haven't had it up and running since I've been on the board.
Nope,
It's
not
been
since
ta-
it
It's been
was
sitting there
built.
maybe, what, 10 years?
2009, yeah.
You know, I see the pros and cons. I also see the downside of the backdoor losses with personnel, and retraining and rehiring and, you know, the revolving door there. I see the expenses associated with that. I've also heard from several other, my colleagues that are really wanting to do a pay raise for our folks, and if they are, I haven't had anybody tell me where in the budget they're gonna find that money without it.
And it's a recurring,
So-
the new firemen, the pay raise, even the equipment things are recurring expenditures because it's not a one-time piece of money you have to find. You have to have that money year over year over year. So you could, if we had $400,000 in something this year that we could cut this one year, that doesn't help us at all because next year we have to replace that and we have to grow that because we're considering bringing these pay raises and things on board mid-year.
It's not like a hot mix asphalt machines you can do once at least every 10 years or so.
And that's
It's
a
annualized.
and the hot mix asphalt machine is a financed purchase, so there's.
And that's where we get most of our calls, potholes and things like that. When they're not filled, you're gonna be getting those calls. What are your feelings on
Well,
pay raises?
the reality of the matter, I think, is I'm the fourth vote to make this budget pass. Are you in favor of any type of tax increase? And I wish Alderman Perkins was here because I think that was pretty much,
I think I can tell you
Yeah,
how he will vote.
Alderman Perkins is not gonna.
I think that's the reality of the matter, so.
I'm in favor of the employee getting a pay raise, but I'm not
How
in
would-
favor.
how would
I'm
fund
not-
it? Well,
I'm
I wanna
not
say
in
this,
favor of no tax. Because you look at, if you keep putting, when the last time we raised the millage, just when recently? When we
There was a
park-
small
Like
increase
last
last
year.
year.
for the park increase. Okay, you keep putting taxes on people. People stop going out and eat. If they stop going out and eat, you're losing revenue now. So
Well, we didn't do a tax increase for the parks now.
Well, I'm just saying, we ain't been on did one.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you
I
gotta
thought
be
you were talking
concerned
about ad
about people with
valorem.
no income, fixed income, and low income people. You know, some of these people still paying ad valorem taxes. But you know, when you gonna drive them not to go out and eat, what I'm going out and eat for? I'm gonna get taxed. I mean, it's so many different ways we gotta look at it. I'm not against giving the employees a raise because y'all know that's how I feel. Where the money coming from, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can't vote for no tax increase.
The PERS, the health insurance, the TIF's gonna take up The minute we hit something else, we are in deficit situation. Any other large expenditure like that, the pay increases, that's $200,000 right there. There ain't the money right there.
Well, and not to throw it, but the state is the one doing that to us, because the PERS was a state
Right,
mandate.
state,
So we
well,
have state mandated requirements that we don't have an option about.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that's just not something that we can go, oh, well, no, let's don't do a PERS increase. We-
So in
we
other
gotta
words,
do
to
it.
do the pay increase that we talked about, or wouldn't have, before you brought us and stuff, that $200,000 pay raise, we gotta raise some money. I mean, the other stuff, you said,
Or cut some service,
I'll cut some, so, go to one.
but I
day.
don't know where it is, so.
What people want me to, so.
What do you think, Ben?
Well, I just think I'm gonna go with the last two on the discretionary, scratch everything else, and you've got my vote. That'd be the fire department re-rating, and that's just from the cost saving standpoint to the city. I mean, the fact is, I see a lot of people every day, and you've got different type individuals living in this town that, there are fixed income individuals that, you know, this is, can be a lot to some individuals that nobody at this table probably could fathom and imagine, but for some it is. And, you know, I would support, the personnel. Just got friends that work for the city that are the same thing, that we have some people that are living right above the poverty line that are in our sanitation department and other departments. And then I think the fire department, 50% re-rating, the 60,000, that comes up to 165, and
That'd be
I think-
$500,000.
I think we desperately need another code enforcement position. How many times does somebody get in touch with you, or do you get in touch with the mayor because a yard hasn't been mowed?
I got a
or-
call before I left home.
I got, last year I got two. I mean, and people, the aldermen that have are in the older parts of town, man, we got, I mean, newer parts of town maybe not so much,
Oh, no, newer parts of town
but
too.
the old parts.
I spend a
we-
good
it's-
portion of my day responding to emails and sending out emails about things around town that need code enforcement.
Oh, that's some addresses I got to bring you.
Just a fact.
And so I think Alderman Carver brings up a good point of looking, if you look at just the personnel changes, including the fire department and the personnel, that's $105,000, but that's just for half a year. So for next year's budget, you got to find an additional $100,000 to get you through the year. And, well,
If you did it for a whole year.
so if you did it for, if you got to come up with another 105
This time next year.
this time next year, and for, you know, some of y'all, I mean, next year's an election, we may have to raise taxes, or maybe you don't, but if you're gonna have to raise them, I think, I guess what I was gonna say, if we're committed, if this board is committed, which I think everybody wants to, fund personnel changes, I wouldn't be looking for organic growth to be able to find that other $100,000 for next year. I think if we wanna pay them, I think the smart money would be to go ahead and have that $200,000 accounted for. So then you're talking 260 if you're talking about with the fire department. So at that point,
And your code folk, man, you got 300,000 per son.
I mean,
You got
at least to
300,000.
consider, because I think if you fund for half a year, then you're right back in the spot next year having to find another $100,000 when other things are likely to be on board that are going to eat up the rest of that organic.
Would your recommendation be that we start October 1 with, in other words, with the people, we try to start trying to hire the people and bring them on as soon as the fiscal year starts as we can, or start waiting till the first of the calendar year?
You asking Alderman Walker a question?
Yes.
Well, I think if I were, I said, I guess if I were going to come down and have to make some tough choices, if I were going to have $1.5 million increase, and knowing that I'm not having to account for that extra $100,000 in personnel, maybe we do start that, maybe you wait 3 months into this year and start it or something like that, and you're able to pick up a couple more of these items that are up top, piece of equipment or something like that.
That's what I said too.
Alderman Carver, if we started first year,
Well-
that gets that, it cuts into it about 25% in your budget year. And then a mill, not $1.5 million, but a mill
I think
probably raises it, probably covers that.
I think you could discuss it all day long, but you still need 4 votes, and I told you how far I'm willing to go. Now,
But
you're
you,
right.
no, but you were just talking about that. And
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is, you shouldn't depend on organic growth, and you make a good point, we've got other TIFs in the future, and, you know, we've got other things that are gonna eat some of that organic growth up, but as far as today and passing this budget this year, I'm willing to do that right now.
So-
And
You're willing to do what now?
Clerk,
the last two, which is on the discretionary
165.
column, 60 and the 105.
Please,
So
please,
that gives
please,
you-
please think about that code enforcement position. I've heard you say before that it's a position that's needed. And the IT equipment,
Alderman Vaughn, you had something you?
clerk, how many millage increases have we done on our term, this term, you
I
know?
have a
Just
chart
one this term.
downstairs. This term has been one. And it was last year.
Well, and the other thing we might think about, obviously, let's just call it what it is. You know, when you get into election year, people who want to get reelected are not supportive of tax increases. So this is a year prior to an election year, so we'll just talk about it in that way. But the reality is, the things that we have that are going to be coming online, from all the things that have been put in place where we see growth and activity in this community, the vistas, College View not so much, a certain amount, but the Vista, for example, will be coming online, but it won't be coming online this year. It's gonna be next year. So when we get to that point where we have some of that assessment, that we will see some revenue, ad valorem revenue coming from something along those lines, it will be the 2021 budget year, it won't be this year. So this would be the year that you would cover that, and then perhaps if we get fortunate with an ad valorem of the Vista coming online and getting those numbers, it will be something that would be sufficient to provide us some other growth requirements or some other needs that we will have. But this year, we don't have these things, and we need them now.
Alderman Sistrum, would a 1 mil increase cover what Alderman Carver's talked about in the personnel, the fire, and the code enforcement?
a 1 mil increase will get you about
270?
No, about 260.
260. When you
Because
cut
we're not
down to
gonna collect-
95%
because we're
or
not gonna
whatever.
collect it all.
And those three added up are what?
Well, with the code enforcement person, 210,
And that's half a year.
That's
of
a half a year.
Half
Yeah.
a year of a raise.
Yeah, that's
I
not
mean,
a
just
full
to-
year.
Just to be clear, that's what we're talking about. That's getting a raise halfway through the year.
And bringing these people on when? That you need like your fire people and stuff?
mid-year,
Mid-year.
mid-year,
So we'll be talking March probably, right?
March,
Mid
April.
Mid-fiscal year, right?
Mid-March, April. But it doesn't help when we get a ransomware attack, because we've not been able to do the things that we need to do. It doesn't give us the storage that we need. And if you could speak to that's a real need, that we have equipment needs in the IT department.
That's right, and with the camera system that we have now, we've got about 11 cameras out there right now. They're all recording in high-quality video, so that's where the storage comes in. Naturally, it's listed under IT, but also police.
Right.
IT doesn't need cameras, the police, and they can speak to the need for those cameras, and the chief Tuesday night spoke to, one particular murder case that was solved and other major crimes that have been solved. So they can talk to the effectiveness of that. We'll provide the best tools and service we can with the resources we're provided, of course, but the other part of that is the ransomware. That's where some of that storage comes in. If we get attacked and they lock down all our data, our best move is to restore from yesterday before we were infected. So barring that, and the more data we have, the more we have to store, the more it costs to store those terabytes and terabytes of data. So we want to stay ahead of that. And from my perspective, of course, that's where part of that ask comes in. So, that's what concerns me. And so I would be remiss if I didn't bring that before the board to your attention. So.
And I don't,
I'm sorry, so Joel, saying that, are there any concrete examples of where that's been an issue, and how susceptible do you think, is the city susceptible right now to?
Right, well, you can Google news stories right now, and mid-sized municipalities are in the sweet spot because a lot of them have a ton of data, a ton of financial data, court records, police records, everything we have is now digitized. So we have a wealth of data, and a lot of municipalities aren't, quite ahead of the curve or are meeting the curve on protecting it. We do that. We strive to do that. So we have a piece of hardware on the edge of our network that prevents things from coming in. We have training that we do with all the employees. We train them on not to click phishing emails and things like that, because that's how it gets in. It's going to be somebody clicking an email. And then the third tier of that is the recovery. When and if it does get in, we can recover. We recover, I mean, we restore things or back things up daily, weekly, monthly, so we can recover at those different recovery points. So that's the fail-safe, that's where we don't even want to get to. And barring that, if we blow through that, then we have to pay the ransom. And if you look at Baltimore, the 22 towns in Texas just declared a state of emergency along with Louisiana because they had many towns locked down from ransomware. That data's gone unless you pay that ransom. Some of them paid $600,000, some of them paid $1 million. It's just how bad do you want all your data back? So there's tons of examples out there.
What about insurance
I'll
coverage?
Joel, that we're also getting hit now. For the last month, we've been getting emails for payroll to get people's status and payroll information changed. It happened to the chief, it's happened to several of our other employees. And luckily enough, we went through some training and we've been able to catch it now. But like it is so good that we've almost made a mistake.
Right, so it's not theoretical. We are under attack right now, today, yesterday, last week. It's not a theoretical situation. So, yes, Alderman Carver, the insurance piece of it, I'm gonna bring for y'all's consideration next board meeting, the first meeting in October, some insurance coverage, and that will be that absolute last tier. If they get through all of our lines of defense, which we pray they never do, but if they do, we would have that insurance where we can pay that ransom and get our data back. But that's an absolute fail-safe, and that's the final, the final stage of that.
Okay.
I got it.
Well, I wanted to ask, do we know what that insurance costs? Because that's a budget item too. So are we looking at it?
For $1 million in coverage, it's about $10,000 per year.
per year?
But that doesn't help you with your productivity when you were shut
You're
down
still down. No,
for
that's
a
right.
day or a
If
week
you
or
get
however
locked up,
long.
you're still down for at least a couple of weeks. And what that means is no access to any financial records, no financial transactions. You don't know who you
Court
owe money to, you
records,
don't know. who
claims
you owe,
documents.
So, I mean, that's a total business lockdown for that time that we're recovering.
No. Well, and we probably want more than 1 million too, thank you very much.
Right, and then so we priced out 2 million and 3 million as well, and I'll bring that before.
All right, well, that's also a budget item. It's
Right.
not in the budget, is it?
Right.
And
Okay.
while we're back talking about numbers, and Alderman Carver mentioned the idea of people who live on fixed incomes and this being potentially an onerous item for them. As I said, this is about a 1% increase in your tax bill. If you go back and find what you paid in taxes last year, it's about 1% of that. I'm an older person on a fixed income, and my tax bill, because I am over 65, my tax bill last year was $1,100. This means it would cost me about $11. If I were under 65, it would have cost me about $22. It is not going to be, unless you're talking about a huge amount of property, it is not going to be very, very much to any one individual. And again, all you got to do is go pull your last year tax bill, and whatever 1% of that is about what your impact will be.
All right, so let's roll around here. Alderman Carver, I believe I hear you saying you're willing to go with a 1 mil tax increase, is that
No, I
accurate?
didn't say that at all. I said the last two discretionary items are $105,000
Right,
and the $60,000 on the fire department rebating.
Okay.
I'm on the hook for that.
okay, so that would be half a mil?
It's .63 or 64 is what I
Okay.
came up with, but y'all want
Okay.
to check my math.
Okay, so, let's say.
And you'd support that?
Sir?
You'd support that?
I will.
Okay,
.64?
It was, let's take it, 165 divided by, I just took that and divided by two, you want to do your 96.75 collection rate. Let's just take 260.
But that's only for half the year, isn't it?
yep, that's half a year.
Let's do that math.
It's
So we're in the same
about
conundrum
0.65.
this time next year.
Yeah.
Just you
It does.
basing that on 96.75
Okay.
Just
collection rate.
rough.
Let's do
Roughly, yeah, roughly.
0.65. All right, so I hear 165 here.
Going once?
Do I hear?
Going once.
Hey, guys, you know, we're working our way through this. So do you have any level that, you have no level you can support? Is that right, Alderman Vaughn?
You just let me think about it.
Okay, well, you think about it. Alderman Little, do you have an amount you can support? Could you support one?
That gets them for the whole year. Close, right.
Or take the, yes, if you want to do it for a full year, a mill. But I'm going to stick with I think that code enforcement position is critical.
But that's adding, that's including for code enforcement.
No,
No,
it's not.
No, this
No,
is
it's not.
fire department pay changes, so.
Yep.
Let me
Half a year
negotiate here. We can enjoy what we're doing while we're doing it, so even if,
I'm
even
gonna
if
let
we
Alderman Carter be the
disagree.
swing vote this round.
Okay.
That's a good spot to be in, isn't it?
Well, I hear he's,
Fourth vote.
well, he's, well,
I wish
I
Vice Mayor
understand.
Perkins was here because.
Well,
He's a no.
we know he's
he's
a no, it doesn't matter, he's always a no for a tax increase,
Right.
and we
It's just his
understand that, we accept
philosophical
it, and that's what we,
position.
and we
Yeah.
move with
Let
it.
me just digest that, over, obviously over the weekend, and I'm comfortable with that, and we'll have more talks, and, I appreciate all the work
Okay.
you've done, and
So,
Thank
we
you.
have,
If anybody
Can I
needs
cer-
any additional anything, I'm here all day tomorrow, I can print and generate anything if anybody needs anything.
and the reality of it is, this is a pretty good year. I know that you're saying some of this organic growth is the word of the day, has been taken up through some of these unfunded mandates and the TIF, and I supported the TIF for Academy. I think, being in Ward 1, it has some benefits to it and some job creation. While we were talking the other night, you have great points on retail versus industrial, businesses coming. I think at the end of the day that this city will continue to thrive, it will continue to have growth, it will continue to grow, and all our department heads will do well with what they've been given. Our department heads do really well with what they've been given over time, and there are always needs. I know if it's made this list, it's obviously
It is.
a necessity, in their mind, they run their departments day to day. But us as elected officials, have to be a voice for the constituents, and I'm out every day, and I have to hear a lot of other opinions that, I asked the question, I had, one gentleman's here has got, I think, 26% new taxes over the last 24, 28 months.
That's not, that's
but-
come from revaluation and from
Yeah.
other groups, it's not from.
which is that organic growth that we've been sucked away from our
And
properties.
of that, we see the trifecta, or the county and the school district and the city. I still think we're in if anybody got that 20th percentile, I know I've seen it on a pie graph last year, but the city is not a significant portion.
It's a small
It's
portion.
lower.
But we get blamed for all of it.
Yeah.
Take it on the chin. And I agree with Alderman Beatty a lot on the TIFs. I think that we need to send the message to the developers that may be out there pondering that we've about have lost our appetite for those, and we're going to have our poker face on and call their bluff, and you're either going to build it or you're not, or we'll just have to wait on somebody else to come develop it.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, and we
I think
can,
we've been generous on those
Yeah.
things, and it's time to tap the brakes on them, and
we can
just
certainly,
either develop or it won't, and
we can certainly send that message.
because we are a growing town, and people are wanting to come here.
And I would like for us to, over the course of the next few months, develop a TIF application process, and not just have a developer come to us with a proposal, but to say that if you're gonna come, you're gonna present us this amount of financial information, and let us make a decision about whether we think it's appropriate to help or not. We typically, you've gotta do this or else.
And they've been planning for months.
Yes, and they have.
We want that form to have it's shadowed in the back of big zero on it.
With a line through it? Okay, all right.
I was going to ask, City Clerk, I think of it.
Go ahead.
What is the total millage rate across the city average would it be for school system, county taxes? 140 mills and city?
I do not know what the city, what the
I-
county and the school.
County's
I think it's closer to
50.
150.
150.
School's
all right.
probably 65.
Yeah,
So,
the county's 50.
when ours is 20, let's call ours 27 right now. Divide that by 100.
It's
I
supposed
know
to
I'm
be
driving
26.
crazy with this, but ours is 18%.
Yeah.
That's not
On
wrong.
the property taxes, but like Dave said, we get.
But so many people believe that every penny of that tax check that they write goes to the city, and it does not. I would happily take all of that money, but it does not.
But we're not gonna change that. We're
Yeah,
not,
that's
no matter how
the
much
truth.
we talk about, we're gonna have to bear it.
The
So
reality
that's
is
just gonna be what we do.
TIFs that have been approved have been approved. Those
Water
things are gonna come,
Yeah.
and they're gonna happen. If it's 0.63 or whatever the number is, I think the thing, if I'm just trying to recall from what Attorney Latimer said the other night, pretty quickly, if that number changes, we've got to be able to advertise that number to be able to get there in time.
Anything
that
below
was- that-
1.5, you don't have to advertise,
Right,
correct?
that's accurate.
Anything below, I did talk to the state, anything below 1.5, the maximum has already been
Right,
advertised.
so anything you go
We are,
below
we are
that,
clear
okay.
to
You've
do
had
what
your
we need
public
to do, it's
hearings.
1.5 or below
Get back
on
down
this,
what you
on
advertised.
Tuesday the 17th.
Yeah, what your projected was?
Sir?
What were your projected?
What was his position?
What his projected was?
Point
On the last two?
65.
I came out with, well, I just took 165 and divided it by, got 265 on meals, and took 96.75%, but it was, we'll say it's 0.64.
Yeah, it's roughly 0.65.
But that would get you, your fire rating and your, I think personnel need to be taken care of, I don't think
That
that's.
takes
an
care of
option.
them for half a year. Again, I just want to state, I mean,
And a class 3 is probably going to impact about, on your fire insurance.
that's
It's
what it
probably going
is.
to drop it about,
But-
you
so what is that
probably
a
realize
year?
that in the millage increase, you probably realize that on your savings on your
Brick
backside of
dwellings will
insurance.
see very little, chief. Brick dwellings will see very little. Frame dwellings will see some. Commercial businesses will see the biggest. We'll get the
They're going to be
restaurant.
paying the most taxes as well.
Exactly that.
but you don't see that until that'd be at least a year out, right?
It's a fact, when that class
They'll
3
be
rate
calling
drops.
immediately saying.
But we're not gonna get
We
the
don't
class
get
3
the
rating
class
until
three.
The
At least a
minimum, the
year
3
out.
goes into effect.
After we hire the.
Right, and that what you
fire
said would be,
We got
the
two
best case
invoices.
scenario is after they've been in place for a year.
They have to be in place for 1 year.
Okay,
When
so-
we went from 7 to 6 in Newton, everybody called the insurance agency at Newton had a class 6. And they went there, one of them called the insurance company and started dropping, amending those policies, dropping those rates to reflect the class 6 fire rate. So that would be immediate, once the protection class rate goes into effect.
Okay, all right, so, you're gonna be thinking about it, and
I've got it under advisement.
you've got under advisement. Okay, so we have at least one who's willing to do, you said 6.4, she said 6.5, however it divvies up, let's say 6.5, just to make.
Let's get the math right now. There's gotta be something we have to fix
Give me
coming out of
give me a
it.
minute, let me see.
Well, no, because what I'm thinking about doing is when we put this on the agenda for Tuesday the 17th.
Put it
we-
0.64.
Okay, all right, 6.4. We can put it there for a blank amount of ad valorem. It simply cannot go over 1.5. So if there is a consensus that goes with a number, then we can fill in the blank on Tuesday the 17th.
Sounds good.
And we can take a motion that says, I move that we raise our ad valorem taxes, or that we don't raise our ad valorem, our millage rate, or we don't raise our millage rate, and then you can fill in whatever number you want to fill in.
You want that motion at this meeting?
No.
Wait, no, wait a minute now, hold on. My assumption was we couldn't do it. I was just.
No, 17th. It has to be at a regular meeting, and that's, our recess meeting will be the regular.
Don't refuse it, so.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm just saying, when it comes Tuesday the 17th, I'm gonna have Ms. Harden put it on the agenda as the millage, and we're gonna leave it blank, and then we will fill in that blank.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, all right, is that, everyone okay with that?
Emmett, did you have anything to add today?
It's a work session.
So the
It's a work
only
session.
question I have about that,
Let's, okay. Yes, sir.
so the question I have about that is, if you don't know going into it, when do you have to have the budget actually balanced? So if we go in and we set that number as X, then you got to go figure out in that budget how you're
Spread
going to
that.
balance based on that.
Well, but are these not the items that
But she'll
will be-
have to spread them by department.
Oh, okay, yeah, but she's gotta do that anyway after the 17th, right?
Right. It has to be run in the newspaper one time by the 30th of September, which means we'll have to get it to the paper about around the 27th or so.
Thank you.
So you got time to do it?
So sure, day.
Okay. All right. Do we have anything else? Ladies and gentlemen, while we've got everybody here.
For the purpose of just information, based on the 1.5 mils increased, so you're going to 28 point whatever it is. Let's see. Break off.
28.13.
And using 95% of your collection rate.
96.75 is what we used, and this year it was 96.88.
You would
So
collect,
you might
according to that,
collect
$7,388,539. Does that sound right?
How many dollars?
$7,388,538 is what we would collect, and that's based on 96.75 collection rate. on 20, whatever, what's the 28? It's 28.1 mils, correct?
That sounds low. You're saying 7.3?
What I'm doing is I'm taking $271,480,000. I'm saying that times the new tax rate, if you had $1.5 million, 26.63 for 1.5 is what, 28.1? 28 point what?
0.13, yeah.
All right. All right. Yeah, when you don't do it, say what?
Let's
That extra
don't be
point.
pulling from the backside.
But I'm just
here.
saying, but that's 7,636.
636, that
All
sounds
right, but
believable.
now I hadn't applied 0.9675 to it, 0.99675 for collection rate. Come on, collect 96.75. That's $7,388,538 or so.
Okay.
So $7,400,000 tops, you know.
We have 3 individuals, one who is committed to something, and 2 that are taking. No, sir, let's don't battle little bitty numbers like, well, I understand, let's not do that, please. We have 2 folks who are gonna take it under advisement, and so when we come to the table on Tuesday the 17th, we will, have a blank and be able to make that determination.
And you have one person that's committed to a 1.5, because I think all of these things are important, and all of them need to be
I
done.
understand, well, I think we actually have 3 that are committed to a 1.5, I believe you have said that you were supportive, and you
I
said you
would,
were
but
supportive.
to get consensus, I mean, if we
Well,
had.
no, I understand that.
Amended a little bit.
I understand, but in terms of where we can get to.
I'm a reasonable guy.
How does the motion need to be worded that is specific for these last 2, for the 105 and the 60?
Well, we will put in there, that would be the motion that whoever makes, that says that you want to include the 2 firefighters and the municipal salary increases for the period of April 2020 through September 2020, I guess. So, okay? All right, if there's nothing else, we will be in adjournment. Thank you all department heads for being here during your last part of the day again. And thank y'all, it costs us overtime, not these guys. Thank you, everyone. All right, appreciate it.